Hey everyone, this video will teach you how summons work in Cage 2 and what their uses are in fights. I often see many people proclaim that they never knew summons could be useful or that they didn't even use them in their first playthrough. I was also guilty of not really knowing much about them or trying them out in fights when I first played the game. This is likely because the game makes no real effort to list what each summon does or is capable of, so it's left up to the player to figure it out, which many may not be willing to waste time doing. So this video should clear up many questions that some may have about summons and also be a good reference if someone does not know how a summon works. Every summon has uses, so you should get all of them. There are only 4 summons and 2 of them are not automatically obtained, so make sure you're grabbing any chests you can. A summon uses 3 drive bars and also does not require party members to be alive, unlike in Cage 1 where you cannot summon if a party member is KO'd. When you bring out a summon, your drive bars are replaced with the summon bars that slowly decrease while the summon is out. Summons can also be hit during a fight, and while they don't have HP, your summon bars will decrease rapidly if they get hit by enemy attacks. Stitch is exempt from this though, as he is actually on your screen and not in the fight itself. Do note that attacking enemies while the summons are out can slightly restore the summon bar. Using this with attacks that multi-hit rapidly can allow you to restore the summon bars slowly to keep them out longer. Lastly, note that using a limit of a summon depletes summon bars. The amount used depends on the summon. Now let's go into detail of each of the 4 summons. This is the first summon you will obtain. It is gained automatically after your forced visit to Hollow Bastion for 100 Acre Woods. Chicken Little has a few different attacks he likes to use on enemies. The first, which is likely the main reason you'd want to use him, is that Chicken Little has the ability to pull enemies into Sora. This usually only works on normal enemies and not bosses, and it usually only is triggered when there are multiple enemies. Not only does there need to be multiple enemies usually, but Chicken Little needs to be close to Sora to pull them in, and there usually can't be enemies surrounding Sora, or else Chicken Little likely won't do this move. Because of this attack, Chicken Little is a great substitute for Magnet early game and can even still be useful later for pulling in enemies for Sora due to not requiring MP to accomplish this, though the huge disadvantage over using Magnet yourself is that you're at the mercy of Chicken Little's AI. Next, we have his Firecracker attack. This move is usually used if Chicken Little is next to Sora and enemies are next to Sora as well. In 2FM they made this move actually deal damage, so it's a nice way to tack on damage to enemies during your own combos. However, sometimes Chicken Little may just use this move instead of his Magnet move, which can be a bit frustrating. Lastly, Chicken Little can toss a ball-type object at enemies to knock them towards Sora. For this move to work, usually there has to be some distance between Sora and the enemy, and if there is more than one enemy, it is likely he'll just do the Magnet move instead. An added benefit of Chicken Little being out is that your HP is restored while you attack enemies, which can serve as a sort of small cure if you attack a lot without getting hit too often. As for Chicken Little's limit, it is an FPS mode in which you can control Chicken Little's attacks. You have square to use Chicken Little's firecrackers to deal damage to nearby enemies in a group, you can use attack to throw the balls at enemies, except in rapid fire fashion, and triangle to simply end the limit early. Compared to how Chicken Little normally works, his FPS mode isn't generally what you'd want to use. While you're invincible during it, it doesn't allow for complete free movement, which restricts you too much for not enough damage output to be worth it. Chicken Little is a great summon for crowd control of enemies surrounding Sora, and a great summon to use early on as a replacement for Magnet until you get that spell. Genie is a bit of a complex summon to use. You obtain him after completing the first visit to Agrabah. Genie actually has access to his own drive forms that parallels your own drive form list. His appearance and limit attack will change depending on what drive form you select. He also only can use drive forms that you already have access to. Genie can use all drives except limit forms since they didn't add him one in 2FM. When Genie is out, the party command is replaced with Genie's drive form selection, so use that to switch his forms. The form he begins in is random when you first summon him. Genie is very different from Chicken Little on his own. He won't attack enemies by himself or pull them into Sora. Instead, Genie follows Sora closely and will attempt to heal Sora if you lose too much HP. To really utilize Genie, you want to pick a relevant drive form for Genie depending on what you're fighting. The sad fact is, the only tool you'll likely be using are Valor Genie and Final Genie. Wisdom doesn't quite cut it for the usefulness, and Master Genie is only okay. To use Genie's drive form attack, select Limit. The first drive form for Genie is Valor, and it was nerfed heavily in 2FM to where the final punch attack when Sora is swinging Genie around does far less damage. So it has less uses in 2FM, but it does have pretty high priority in staggering enemies, and if all hits connect, it can dish out a decent amount of damage even at low levels. Next, we have Wisdom Genie, where Genie will rapid fire magic at enemies in front of Sora. Sadly, this move doesn't deal much damage and is too over the place to be very useful in most situations you'd even want to use it in. Moving on to Master Genie, it's basically a better Wisdom Genie attack where Sora and Genie spin around shooting magic. Combining this with Magnet can also lead to more damage, making this attack somewhat acceptable in fights. Last, we have Final Genie, and this is a rather strong physical and magic attack. If you combine this with magic, it will do an insane amount of damage to enemies and is often a strategy players use on the final fight in the Cavern of Remembrance Nobodies to deal with the sorcerers. In short, Genie's only real use is getting some damage output if used properly, with a small added benefit of Genie trying to keep Sora alive if his HP drops too low. Most times, the other three summons are better options, but Genie does have his uses even in speedrunning. Also note that because Genie is so large, he can get hit easier than the other summons, so try to make sure to bring attacks away from Genie. The third summon in the list is Stitch, who is actually the first summon you can avoid obtaining. The chest containing Stitch is a big chest on the way back into Space Paranoids after you temporarily leave the world. Stitch is oftentimes considered the best summon, and I will explain in great detail why that is the case. Many players know of his basic benefits, but might not notice his other benefits. The most obvious benefit to Stitch is that he can restore Sora's MP at any given time for free. This allows Sora access to magic much more frequently. In speedruns we use Stitch a few times just so we can use Magnet into either physical attacks or Thunder. This translates well to casual play too because it means you can cure more often as well. The downside to this is that it's completely random if Stitch restores your MP. He will more times than not restore it before you run out, but every so often he will refuse to give you MP back, leaving you in the dark if your strategy is to spam magic. Next, Stitch has the ability to parry many physical attacks in the game, even many projectiles, which can definitely save Sora's life on higher difficulties or low-level play. This means you can ignore many of the dangerous projectiles that can hit you, such as a Trick Ghost Orb or Sniper's laser attack, so that you can focus on being more offensive. The last normal attack Stitch can do is play his ukulele, which can stagger all enemies on the field that have the ability to be staggered. This also includes bosses. While the enemies are all being staggered as well, they drop HP orbs which can be used to help Sora heal while the enemies cannot attack. Stitch also will frequently use this move if you're lower on HP, and if you're extremely low on HP, he will pretty much exclusively use this move. Lastly, Stitch can actually very slowly heal you over the course of time. It is almost unnoticeable, but he does do it, so if you're at 1 HP with Stitch out, he can make Second Chance and once more reactivate by bringing you slightly higher than 1 HP sometimes. Stitch's limit is similar to when Stitch plays his ukulele by himself, except now Sora joins him. You can either press square, triangle, or attack during this limit. If you choose square, both Stitch and Sora both play a song to stagger all enemies on screen to drop HP orbs. If you choose triangle, Stitch shoots enemies for damage while Sora staggers them with playing. Then lastly, attack will have both Stitch and Sora attack. Needless to say, this limit is not very good, and you're better off just having Stitch as support in the background, especially because this limit burns through a ton of summon bars. So with all of these benefits, Stitch is a very useful summon to have out, especially if you use MP a lot. The only downside is that you can't really control what Stitch does, and he may leave you sitting waiting for MP to restore instead of helping you out. On the plus side, he's the only summon that cannot be hit by enemies because he's not actually on the field, he's on the screen, which makes it much harder for enemies to try to burn through your summon bars. The final summon you can obtain is Peter Pan. Like Stitch, he is also skippable and resides in a chest in the second visit to Port Royal. Peter Pan works similar to Tinkerbell in KH1. When you bring Peter Pan out, Tinkerbell comes out as well and will heal your HP slowly over time and also has auto life if you die. This only works once per summon usage. If Tinkerbell brings you back to life, she also no longer heals you while that same usage of Peter Pan is out. Next, Peter Pan follows Sora like most summons, but will only attack when Sora does. Peter Pan himself won't deal much damage, but his attack is a high priority stagger, which combined with Sora's attacking with multi-hit attacks can lead to some very interesting strategies in some fights, by having him bypass the revenge value of bosses. Peter Pan's limit begins by flying together with Sora. You have free movement during this, and if you pass by enemies, you can bring them into you for a bit, making this work somewhat like a magnet. For attacks, you can choose to press triangle or attack. If you choose triangle, the enemies drop HP orbs, and if you choose attack, the enemies drop MP orbs. The attack itself is not very useful outside of trying to bring in a bunch of enemies together or if you're orb farming in the Olympus Cups. So even though Peter Pan is the final summon you can obtain, he's best used in fights for Tinkerbell's auto life and slow healing. If used well, Peter Pan can help you stagger enemies as well, but can also make it harder to land successful combos, so there are definitely both benefits and disadvantages to using him. Also, just like Genie and Chicken Little, Peter Pan can get hit pretty easily, making him run out fast if you're not careful. This concludes my summons video. The key to using summons is knowing which summon is useful for which scenario or strategy that you're doing. For example, if your strategy is to use Magnet on enemies, there isn't really a need to have Chicken Little over Stitch. Or if you don't die often, perhaps Peter Pan isn't worth having out as a failsafe. That is all, thanks for watching.